Hello there, welcome back to Marcelian Online, and rejoice because it finally happened. Warrior and Shadow Priest have been buffed. We've been looking at buffs and nerfs for classes for the past, I don't know, 2 months, and some of them kept escaping the gaze of the developers, but now they're in with a few more that kind of desperately needed some assistance. And is it too late a little bit? Well, let's take a quick look and talk about where we are right now in the season with the class tuning. First of all, Augmentation has been addressed in a very weird way with a nerf. What? Augmentation nerfed? Listen. The narrow bar Palisupi set has been nerfed, where the upheaval damage was increased by 30%, now it will be increased by 15%, and eruption will remain 15% down also from 30%. And to quote the developer's notes, with recent buffs to Augmentation's personal damage, this older class set became stronger than intended. Now, I'm not an Augmentation player, nor do I know the details of this. However, every time this happens, it happens because the old tier set is simming slightly higher than the current one, at least at a similar if not lower item level, and that's kind of yicky if you want to go to Augmentation right now, play it and realize, oh, I'm better off farming the old raid for the tier set than the new raid. Tier sets being stronger than the other is not necessarily new, but being forced to play an older content just to get the upgrade that you need doesn't really do much favors for the current season and the player that wants to actually play the spec, because I mean, who will even do narrow bar with you right now when everybody's in Undermine, especially halfway through the season. Augmentation has had quite a journey, and I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's currently ranked as A tier in terms of the overall performance. Obviously, you know, with a pinch of salt as always with all of these tier lists, we know about that, but it is suffice to say that Augmentation is back in a state that at least we didn't predict it would be, where it's strong but not overpowered or a meta spec. This is very new for Augmentation, and maybe there's a future for the spec where it won't be a degenerate auto pick in every party that has been the case for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 seasons. Moving on, finishing up with the Evoker, Preservation has been addressed as, I think, currently the weakest healer. Healing of all spells and abilities is increased by 4%. Living Flame healing increased by 30%. Spirit Bloom healing increased by 20%. And Echo's base healing increased by 100%. This only affects the raw healing, not how strong copied spells are. Now you're looking at these numbers, and it's great that they're big. Their overall direct healing is not too huge, so you don't, draw the conclusion that Preservation is overpowered. Unless it might be, at which point are we really upset if that becomes the case? Preservation is cool. Maybe one of the coolest healers, much to the dismay of Marcelian playing this split right now. But seeing Preservation a meta spec hasn't happened once, except for the first month of Dragonflight before it got nerfed into the ground. So it's great to see more healing throughput. It's great to see more healers being brought closer, especially when the specs that are being addressed are at the bottom of the barrel in terms of performance. It's reassuring. Now, I don't know if this will pump Preservation to the top dog spot, but it definitely helps its case, and hopefully we can see more of this going further. Survival Hunter. Finally being addressed, also one of the worst performing DPS specs in the game. Now we will have explosive shot damage increased by 15% and Fury of the Eagle damage increased by 25%. Now, in terms of the overall meta, Survival has been pretty far behind a lot of the specs for a lot of the time. It seems mostly in AoE situations, since in single target it has kind of pulled a little bit ahead, more so than most people would think, and the buffs are essentially addressing its more Mythic Plus performance, since Explosive Shot and Fury of the Eagle are part of your Mythic Plus build. The buffs to them are good, they're not big parts of your damage. Still, Wildfire Bomb will reign supreme as your damage profile king, and this would amount to probably a few percentage of damage increase overall over the course of a dungeon, but considering that these are all AoE, it remains to see how they actually scale in the dungeons that it will do, since right now it's very hard to gauge Survival's performance, since It's 4 key levels behind everybody else since we're talking about Mythic Plus here. And in modern WoW standards, that is pretty far behind considering the key squish. 4 key levels would have been about, I don't know, 7, 8 key levels back in Dragonflight, and that's quite a big difference if you are a Dragonflight and older player of Mythic Plus. So it's great to see these buffs. Likely might still need more considering its competition, its marksmanship, that's not doubling its damage, but it's doing about, I don't know, 20, 30, 50% more damage than survival. With, you know, a pinch of salt, of course, as always. Mage getting buffed. How about that? This is something a little bit unexpected, but Frost Mage is getting an overall 3% buff across the board. 3% is obviously good. It's okay. Frost Mage was doing pretty well across the board. Nobody was complaining. Almost close to being S tier spec. Mage is eating very well this season. So, okay. I see Frost trying to bridge the gap between Arcane and Fire with the 3%. That definitely bridges some part of that gap. But was Frost Mage really the spec that needed this buff? Overall, I cannot really be upset. Frost has been mostly unplayed spec outside of the season that we just finished last time. And that was just very briefly anyway. Holy Paladin. Dude, this spec has been on a roller coaster as well, I feel, this patch, and I don't know still where its place is because you have people like Ellismere who are fucking gods at this class, making it feel like Holy needs nerfed, but then you have the rest of the player base thinking like, bro, I'm human. So Lightsmith Blessing of the Forge healing has been increased by 15%, and also for Lightsmith, Hammer and Anvil healing increased by 20%. This is mostly to address the hero talent Lightsmith, obviously, because it's, you know, the unplayed version right now, and Lightsmith did take a big dip from Season 1 to Season 2 for both Holy and Protection. And Holy Paladin right now is playing most of its keys, if not all of them, with Sun's avatar. So this will essentially just make it a little bit more competitive. It's not necessarily a buff to the class or spec itself. It's a buff to what you are not using anyway because it's too weak. So until it overtakes Sun's avatar, we cannot really call this a buff to the class or to the spec in this case. But we'll have to see how the top performance will use this to, I don't know, push more keys, I suppose, or maybe do better in raids. Moving on to Rogue, Subtlety gets a 5% overall damage increase. Again, I think we can make a trio of the worst performing specs in dungeons and raids, and Subtlety and Frost Mage seems to be part of that trio, or seem to be rather, because there's 2 of them. So it's great that we're seeing Subtlety getting a 5% damage increase, which is something that Subtlety definitely needed. Being addressed is nice. Again, we don't know if this is enough since usually these buffs come at incremental pieces, parts. So it's likely that it needs more. What would be great is to kind of see this being addressed almost every week, ideally, since we're kind of reaching the tail end of the season. And people don't want to feel like they've been ignored for the rest of the season or getting buffed just like a week before the next season starts. It's still gonna be a while until the next season starts, don't worry, we still are not out in 11.1.7, but it's great to see Subtlety also being addressed together with Survival, and I would have wanted to see one more spec in this list today, but unfortunately it's not here. But what is here is Restoration Shaman, particularly Farseer, since I believe Restoration Shaman currently uses Totemic in both raids and dungeons, and Farseer has fallen pretty far behind. Although there have been rumors that people are using Farseer to clear some pretty high keys in Mythic Plus, so I don't know exactly. But let's check out the buffs. Elemental Reverb now increases Riptide healing by 20%, which was 10% before. Maelstrom Supremacy now increases the healing of Healing Wave, Healing Surge, Wellspring, Downpour, and Chain Heal by 25%, up from 15%. That's actually quite a sizable increase. Offering from Beyond now reduces the cooldown of Riptide by 3 seconds, which was 2 seconds. Again, more Riptides, more Primal Tattle Core, at least in raid I believe it's used. Primordial Capacity now increases maximum mana by 10%, was 5%. I have played with Restoration Shaman, by the way, with Totemic to be fair, and I had run out of mana, but that's probably because I was bad. Either way, mana management can still be something that healers struggle with, especially, you know, let's say average or bad healers like myself, so getting more mana, that's great, but that would imply that Farseer is better than Totemic, which is not very clear. It might be after today, or, you know, after reset when the buffs actually apply. Hydro Bubble absorption increased by 25%, and Hydro Bubble now lasts for 15 seconds, up from 10 seconds. So once again, just really good buffs across the board with Farseer. Because not a lot of people are using it, it's very hard to gauge the difference and the usefulness of all of these buffs. Obviously, any plus is better than nothing. And we're moving to the Warlock class, which I was hoping to see a different spec here, and you might guess which one it is, but it's not. It's Destruction, and getting a lot of buffs for Diabolist. And I think that's fine for Destruction, since I believe any spec that's not Demonology was not using Diabolist, which is only Destruction that's left. Ruination damage increased by 35%. Wicked Cleave damage increased by 15%. Chaos Salvo damage increased by 15%. Fellseeker damage increased by 15%. Gloom of Nethraza now causes enemies marked by your Havoc to take 7% increased damage from your single target spells was 5%. Now, once again, these are buffs to the Diabolist hero talent that's currently not used to push the highest of content with Destruction. Is mostly Hell Color these days. So that's great to make them more competitive, because that is exactly what was promised with these hero talents, that we won't just have one that's clearly better than the other one, and the other one just being like a cosmetic choice. So Diabolist being buffed, that's great. Hopefully it gives Hell Color a run for its money, where Warlocks can now choose between the two. Interestingly enough, Diabolist is being used by Demonology, so that doesn't really apply. And last but not least, finally, I have heard you, warriors. You have been listened. It took only 3 months, but we're here. Arms gets a Whirlwind buff of 100%. Can we rejoice? This is exactly what people have been at. No, not Whirlwind. Oh. Well, that's your buff. Take it and like it, and we'll see you in 3 more months. I'm just kidding. But Fury has had an actual way better change in this, where Whirlwind damage was increased by 120%, Thunderclap damage increased by 25%, Odin's Fury damage increased by 30%, dude. Oh my god, I wish Odin Fury gets back. Then Mountain Thane Thunder Blast damage increased by 25%. I believe the Thunder Blast is probably to keep in tune with the Thunderclap increase. Whirlwind damage being increased by 120%. I don't know what that means, because obviously as Mountain Thane you're not using Whirlwind at all. And as Slayer is so undertuned for Fury, just the Whirlwind buff is not gonna be enough to bring it back from the dead. But the Thunderclap damage definitely helps. The Odin's Fury, it's not being played at the moment, so we're always talking about the, oh, okay, this is a big buff for Odin's Fury, by the way, but if it's way worse than anything else that you're playing, then it doesn't really buff the spec, does it? Unless the buffs actually overtakes whatever its competition was by a sizable margin. Fury Warrior has been struggling a little bit, particularly with AoE, and this is a season where AoE uncapped specs are reigning supreme, and seeing specs like Fury being buffed for AoE is good. But it is great to see more specs being addressed, specs that have been ignored for a long time, and we can only hope that this happens a few more times in the next month, so that we can have more people just enjoy their specs, maybe even come back to the game and fill my Mythic Plus group so I can do damage and not have to tank all the goddamn time. But what do you think? Is your spec in this list? Has it been addressed, or does it need more buffs? And if it's red, please, please, please don't comment. We know, man, we know. And also, you know, check this video out for more awesome content to come in World of Warcraft. I'm talking about the Legion remix, baby. If you're not sure if you should play WoW today in anticipation for this new event, you should, because it's nice.